Good morning. We've basically got Phil Kelly here, who's the owner of OzInvest. Phil, tell us a little bit about OzInvest and a little bit about your company.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. OzInvest is a property investment company that I own in Australia, and that company's been running since 1987, so 22 years just coming up. We've got a lot of staff in both Sydney and Brisbane, where we've set up the company so it's a fully holistic approach to investing in property in Australia, where we actually market the properties on behalf of the builders and the developers. We also then help clients obtain all their finance and oversee some of the legal work that's involved in getting the owner to become a property owner in Australia, to make sure that they're not having any problems with Australian law that you may not be aware of already. And we also then go on to the stage of supervising the construction of the property after the sale. And our properties predominantly are only houses, 4-bedroom, double garage, ensuite and all that sort of stuff. And additionally, on the end of that, once the house is already constructed, we, as you can see on the board behind me, offer a 10-year leaseback arrangement on that property for all our purchasers, whether they be living in Australia or people from overseas.
Just a moment, Phil, you mentioned the houses and you've actually got a very good example of a house there behind you of a typical 4-bedroom Australian home. Why is it that you focus only on those? And secondly, why is it that you focus only on Brisbane and Melbourne, for those typical Australian homes?
Yeah, good question. The reason I stick to Brisbane and Melbourne is if you look at the infrastructures around Australia and where the people are moving to, where the capital growth is happening at a very steady rate. The two standout performers in my research has been both Brisbane in Queensland and also Melbourne down south in Victoria. And predominantly those two areas have just continuously seen very good growth from a population point of view, which creates supply and demand, which is exactly what we're looking for when you're trying to look at the next step, of course, which is capital growth. So if you're looking for a good quality house in a capital city location, and we then make sure that they're near the schools, shops, public transport, all that sort of infrastructure that tenants would be looking for, because I've got to make it very available for a good rental market to be able to rent these properties out to guarantee that we will be able to make best use of the 10-year leaseback scheme that we have operating. And the reason we only do houses is predominantly probably my own personal preferences to a large degree, but I'm a firm believer in the long term, what goes up in value is land. So if we've got the land and then a house, you're not getting hit with, you're the whole owner, you own the whole package, it's not something you've got to share with anyone else, it's your name on the title deed, no one can take it off you, it is yours for growth of your financial assets over the coming years, and you're the one in control of it. You're not sharing it then with a body corporate situation where you're then paying out additional body corporate fees. And when it comes to investing in Australia, I see it as a very, very good thing, because most people in Australia as well, when they're looking for something to rent, most people out there are families, mum and dad, a couple of kids, dog and a cat, all that sort of stuff. And what they're looking for to live in predominantly is houses, not units. So I've just focused the company that way to make sure that we offer what I believe, A, the market's looking for, and B, what the purchaser is looking for to maximise their capital growth.
Lastly, it's very interesting. I've been in the international property game for over 15 years. I've never seen anything like the 10-year leaseback. I've heard a lot about rental guarantees, developers putting on a margin, 10, 15%, and then renting it with a guaranteed rent for 2 years. The leaseback's a very different option. From what I can understand, the best part about it is that it's actually all in the favour of the buyer and provides a safety net for the buyer, and most importantly, makes sure that OzInvest is providing you with the right information in terms of rentals. Could you just explain a little bit about it, the mindset behind it, and most importantly, why you do it?
It's a common question we get asked. Most people look at it and think, no, it sounds too good to be true, or what's the catch, etc. I'm used to hearing all that. Been hearing it since we implemented the lease back in July 1998. It was just a simple thing that came up where one of my staff, Sarah Provençal, who's now my general manager, suggested to me that the two biggest fears purchasers have is vacancies, where they're not going to get any rent coming in the door at all, and rental arrears, where again they're not going to be getting any rent coming in the door at all, yet they're still required to pay their mortgage at the end of every month. Sarah's suggestion initially back in 1998, 11 years ago, was would an owner be prepared to pay a small amount of money to take away the fear of both rental arrears and vacancies. Now, I don't mean a small amount of money on top of the purchase price. The purchase price doesn't vary whether people want the lease back or not. The simple fact is we charge our owners a small fee of $15 a week plus GST or VAT, depends on what country you come from. So it's the $15 a week is what makes this work. But I charge my clients that want to be in the leaseback scheme a fee of $15 per week for each property that they own. And that amount of money just builds up very, very nicely from a company point of view. At this stage, we're approaching the 1,000 mark of the amount of properties that we have in the leaseback scheme. Now, it is a very simple thing that if 1,000 people are giving me $15 a week, that builds up into a very good pool of funds where we simply dip into that pool at any time at all that we need to. If a purchaser has got any vacancies or arrears happening, they still get their full complement of rent off my company every month without fail. And that is something we've been doing, as I say, for almost 11 years. The easiest way I've got of explaining it is if a purchaser comes along and wants to buy a property from me, we then sell them a property and offer them the opportunity to go into the leaseback scheme. If they agree to that, they then lease the property to me, to my company. So we become the primary tenant. I then put the property into the staff that I have working for me in the property management field. They go out and then find tenants that are found suitable to then live in that property. At that stage, that tenant living in the purchaser's house has signed a lease though with me. So all I'm doing is subletting the property off the owner, and I'm renting the property off the owner and subletting it to the actual tenant who is living in that property. Now, if you place yourself in that simple situation, what you find, the owner now, their tenant is me. Think about that. If the tenant now in the house does not pay their rent, or if the house is empty, it's irrelevant to the owner. Either situation occurs, I still have to pay the owner their full complement of rent every month. I know it sounds too good to be true. I've heard it before and I'll probably keep hearing it for the next 10, 15, 20 years that we'll be running this scheme. But it sounds too good to be true, but it's one of those unusual circumstances where it is such a simplistic approach to doing property investment, and it's good for me because I make money out of it. I make no bones about that. If I wasn't making money out of it, I wouldn't do it. But it's also very, very good from a purchaser's point of view, where they can put themselves into a situation where they can buy a good quality 4-bedroom double garage ensuite house in Australia and know that the rent will be coming in month after month after month without fail.
And I think also just to add there, also your property management companies making sure all the maintenance has been done and everything. So there's no telephone calls about a toilet leaking or a window being broken. That's all been taken care of as well. I think another thing that's just very important to realise is that OzInvest have to really believe in what they're actually delivering as a product, that it can be rented. Because if they can't rent it, they lose money. And it's a very good safety net that they're going out and Richard, who's your acquisitions manager, goes out and does all that research to make sure that it's the best property in the best rental demand area where there's good growth. And you've got your checklist with all the schools and everything else basically. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you've got a very good idea from Phil. And Phil, thank you very much for your time there. We certainly look forward to helping a lot of people invest in Australia. You've got an end-to-end solution that really helps a buyer and an investor invest in Australian property. We believe that, from a particular South African and a UK situation, by partnering with yourself, we can give someone a hassle-free experience and ultimately help them invest with confidence. So thank you, Phil, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
We look forward to working with you guys from IPS as well. So thank you very much, Scott.
Cheers.